The chandeliers at the Dallas Winter Charity Ball always reminded me of frozen tears, thousands of crystal droplets suspended in midair, catching light from every angle. That night, they seemed to tremble slightly, as if they too sensed the fracture about to split my carefully constructed world. I stood near the grand piano, champagne flute in hand, surveying the ballroom with the practiced eye of someone who had navigated Dallas high society for nearly 4 decades. At 59, I had buried a husband, raised 3 sons to adulthood, and earned my place as Diana Montgomery, respected widow and matriarch of one of the city's most prominent families. My silver-streaked dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, my midnight blue gown selected to convey dignified elegance rather than desperate competition with women half my age. Across the room, my daughter-in-law Celeste laughed softly at something Senator Whitmore's wife had said. Even from a distance, she was captivating, her honey-blonde hair falling in loose waves over bare shoulders, her champagne-colored gown catching the light as she moved. She had been married to my eldest son, Grayson, for 9 years, and had given us our only grandchild, 7-year-old Matthew. Diana, darling, the silent auction closes in 20 minutes. Miranda Patterson touched my elbow, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Have you placed your bid on the Aspen weekend? I'm afraid I'll be too busy this spring, I replied with a practiced smile. Grayson's company is expanding to Europe, and I promised to help with Matthew while they travel. As Miranda moved on to her next social obligation, my phone vibrated in my clutch. Few people would call during an event like this. Fewer still would merit an answer. But when I saw Lucas's name, my youngest son, the free spirit who had chosen the skies over the family business, I stepped away from the crowd. Lucas, is everything all right? His voice came through tense, almost breathless. Mom, I need you to check something for me. This is going to sound insane. What is it? I moved toward a quieter corner, keeping my voice low. Is Celeste still at the gala with you? I glanced across the ballroom, where my daughter-in-law stood in animated conversation. Yes, of course. She's right here beside me. A slight exaggeration, but she was certainly present and accounted for. Why? There was a long pause. When Lucas spoke again, his voice had dropped, each word heavy with disbelief. That's impossible, Mom. Absolutely impossible. His words sent an inexplicable chill down my spine. Celeste just boarded my flight to Geneva, with a man I don't know. I'm looking at her right now. My gaze remained fixed on the woman across the room. Celeste, elegant and poised as always, lifting a champagne flute to her perfect lips. Lucas, that's ridiculous. She's standing 20 feet from me. I'm telling you, Mom. She walked past me during boarding. I have her passport right here. She dropped it. Same name, same face. She's sitting in first class with some man I've never seen. Dark hair, expensive suit, maybe mid-40s. The room suddenly felt too warm, the music too loud. I watched as Celeste excused herself from her conversation and began walking toward the ladies' room, her gait graceful and measured. This doesn't make sense, I whispered, more to myself than to Lucas. Mom, listen to me. Lucas's voice had steadied, taking on the calm authority he used when navigating turbulent skies. Something isn't right. I can see her from the cockpit door. She's wearing a black dress, her hair's up, and she's pretending not to know me. The man with her keeps looking around like he's watching for someone. I thought back to the strange inconsistencies I'd noticed over recent months. Mood swings that seemed too abrupt. Preferences that changed inexplicably. The occasional blank look when I referenced shared memories. Lucas. They're closing the doors. I have to go. But Mom, be careful. If she's there with you, then who the hell is on my plane? The call ended, leaving me alone with a question that defied rational explanation. The chandeliers above seemed to waver, casting dancing shadows across the marble floor. And then I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I turned to find Grayson, my eldest son, his face etched with concern. Mom? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Just a strange call. Nothing important. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes, so like his father's, but he merely offered his arm. The auction results are about to be announced. Celeste was hoping her bid on the Cayman vacation won. As he guided me back toward the center of the ballroom, I spotted Celeste emerging from the ladies' room. For a brief moment, caught in the shifting light, something about her face seemed different. Harder, perhaps. Calculating. Then she smiled, and she was once again the perfect daughter-in-law everyone admired. There she is, I said, pointing her out to Grayson. Who else would it be? He laughed, but there was an edge to his voice that caught my attention. In that moment, standing amid Dallas's elite, surrounded by wealth and privilege, I realized that the foundations of our family were built on something far more fragile than I had ever imagined. And as the evening progressed, every smile, every laugh, every touch between my son and his wife felt like a performance I was watching with new, suspicious eyes. The truth would come later, but that night, beneath the trembling chandeliers, I felt the first tremors of a revelation that would shatter everything we thought we knew. 3 weeks before the gala, I had noticed the first crack in Celeste's perfect facade. We were having Sunday dinner at my home in Highland Park, a tradition I'd maintained since Robert's death 5 years ago. The sprawling colonial revival house felt less empty when filled with family. Grayson, discussing business with calm authority. Lucas, when he wasn't flying, bringing tales of faraway cities. Matthew racing through the halls with childish abandon. And Celeste, always immaculately presented, helping me in the kitchen despite my protests. "Grandmother, look what I found!" Matthew burst into the kitchen, clutching a silver pocket watch. His dark eyes, Montgomery eyes we called them, sparkled with excitement. I recognized it immediately. "Your grandfather's watch." I wiped my hands on a towel and took it from him gently. "Where did you find this?" "I thought it was in the safe." "It was in Mom's jewelry box," he said innocently. I was looking for treasure. Celeste turned from the counter where she'd been arranging canapes. "Matthew, what have I told you about going through my things?" Her tone was sharp, uncharacteristically harsh. "I'm sorry." His little shoulders slumped. I placed a hand on his head. "It's all right, treasure hunter. Why don't you go tell your father you found Grandpa's watch?" After he scampered away, I turned to Celeste. "I didn't realize you had Robert's watch." Her expression shifted subtly. "Grayson gave it to me for safekeeping." She returned to her task, but her movements were tense, precise. "That's strange. Grayson told me he was looking for it last month." A brief flash of something, annoyance, concern, crossed her face before she smiled. "Oh, I forgot I had it. Poor memory lately." She laughed, using her left hand to brush back a strand of hair. I'd known Celeste for over a decade. She was right-handed. That night, as the family gathered in the dining room, I watched her more closely. She used her right hand for the silverware, but occasionally reached for her water glass with her left. When Grayson mentioned their trip to Aspen last winter, she nodded along but added no details to the conversation. And when Lucas asked if she'd heard back from her old college roommate about the charity auction donation, she looked momentarily blank before recovering with a vague answer. "Diana, this roast is exceptional," she said, changing the subject. "You must give me the recipe." I'd given her that recipe 3 Christmases ago. She'd made it herself last Easter. After dinner, as Grayson helped Matthew build a fortress of sofa cushions in the living room, I cornered Lucas in the study. "Have you noticed anything different about Celeste lately?" I kept my voice low, feeling slightly ridiculous even as I asked. Lucas leaned against our father's desk, considering. "She asked me where the guest towels were kept last time she was here. She's the one who organized your linen closet after Dad died." It was a small thing, forgetting where towels were kept, but it added to the growing collection of inconsistencies. That had been nagging at me. The following week brought more strange moments. Celeste called to cancel our usual Tuesday lunch, claiming she had a doctor's appointment. Later that afternoon, Catherine Whitmore called to thank me for the lovely time she'd had lunching with Celeste at Le Méridien. When I casually mentioned this to Celeste at a family dinner, she didn't miss a beat. Oh, that was Wednesday. Tuesday was the doctor. But Catherine had been specific about the date, mentioning it was her anniversary. Then there was the incident with the paintings. Celeste had always admired a pair of small impressionist works in my sitting room, originals by a moderately successful artist Robert had discovered. She'd often commented on the way the light caught the water in the harbor scene. When she visited for tea with her women's charity group, she walked past those paintings without a glance. Later, as the ladies discussed art acquisitions for the Children's Hospital, she referred to them as those little watercolors rather than oils. Small discrepancies continued to accumulate. She wore perfume she had previously claimed gave her headaches. She developed a sudden passion for spicy food after years of avoiding it. She referred to Matthew's teacher by the wrong name, though she'd been on the PTA committee with the woman for 2 years. Each instance seemed trivial in isolation, the kind of small lapses anyone might have. But collectively, they began to form a pattern I couldn't ignore. The night before the gala, I visited Grayson and Celeste at their home in Preston Hollow, an elegantly modern structure of glass and stone that Celeste had spent 2 years perfecting with an exclusive designer. Matthew was already asleep when I arrived. Grayson poured drinks in the living room while Celeste finished a call in her home office. Through the partially open door, I heard her voice. Firm, businesslike, speaking what sounded like fluent French. I'd never known Celeste to speak anything but English and the tourist Spanish she'd picked up during their vacations in Mexico. When she emerged, smiling warmly, I almost asked her about it. Instead, I commented on the new sculpture in their entryway, a twisted bronze piece that seemed at odds with the clean aesthetic she usually preferred. "It's stunning, isn't it?" she said. "I fell in love with it the moment I saw it." Grayson looked up sharply. "I thought you hated it. You said it was aggressively ugly when the dealer brought it over." Her smile never faltered. "I've learned to appreciate it. Art is subjective, after all." Later, as Grayson walked me to my car, I noticed he seemed preoccupied. "Is everything all right, darling?" I asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Just business stress. The Geneva expansion is more complicated than we anticipated. And with Celeste, things seem good." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought he might confide something. Instead, he kissed my cheek. "Everything's fine, Mom. We're fine." But as I drove home through the quiet Dallas streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing was fine at all. Something was shifting beneath the surface of our lives, like shadows moving under ice. And somehow, I knew the truth would crack through, whether we were prepared for it or not. The chandeliers continued their silent vigil as I rejoined the gala, my mind racing with impossible theories. I kept Celeste in my peripheral vision while making the obligatory rounds, exchanging pleasantries with Dallas's elite as if my world wasn't tilting on its axis. "Diana, you've outdone yourself with the fundraising this year," Eleanor Blackwell gushed, her diamonds competing with the chandeliers for brilliance. "We've already exceeded last year's total by 30%. The Children's Hospital needs that new wing." I responded automatically, watching as Celeste laughed at something Senator Whitmore said. She touched his arm, a gesture I'd seen her make 100 times, perfectly calibrated for warmth without impropriety. My phone vibrated again. "Lucas." I excused myself and slipped into an alcove near the grand staircase. "Lucas, aren't you in the air? We're delayed on the tarmac. Mechanical issue." His voice was tight. "Mom, I got closer. I'm telling you, that's Celeste on my plane. Same height, same features, same voice when I heard her speak." "That's impossible," I whispered, though the certainty in my voice had evaporated. "I managed to get a photo without being obvious. I'm sending it now." The image loaded, blurry, taken at an angle, but unmistakably Celeste, or someone identical to her, sitting beside a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair. She wore a black cocktail dress, her hair swept into an elegant updo different from the loose waves Celeste wore tonight. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my fingers tightening around the phone. "Mom, listen to me." Lucas's voice dropped lower. "I overheard them talking. They mentioned Grayson by name. The man said something about your husband's business and Geneva." A chill crept up my spine. "Grayson's opening the European office in Geneva next month." "Exactly, and get this. They're using different passports now. When she dropped hers, I saw the name Celeste Montgomery. But when they went through security, she presented another one. I couldn't see the name." I glanced across the ballroom at Celeste, or whoever she was, now engaged in conversation with the mayor's wife. "What are you suggesting? That Celeste has a twin? That she's somehow in two places at once?" "I don't know," Lucas admitted, "but I'm not imagining this." A thought struck me with sudden clarity. "Your father once told me something about Celeste's background check." "What background check?" "Before they married. You know your father. He was thorough about who entered the family. He never shared the details, but he mentioned inconsistencies in her history. Grayson dismissed it as clerical. "Errors." The line crackled with static. "They're announcing our departure. I have to go. But Mom, be careful. Don't confront her yet. If this is some kind of identity fraud or worse." "I understand." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Call me when you land." I ended the call and stood motionless for a moment, gathering my composure. When I turned to rejoin the party, Grayson stood there, his expression unreadable. "Everything all right, Mom? You've been on your phone half the evening." I manufactured a smile. "Just foundation business. The McAllister grant is being finalized." He didn't believe me. I could read my son like a book. Had since he was a little boy trying to hide broken vases or smuggle frogs into the house. but he played along, offering his arm to escort me back to the main floor. "Where's Celeste?" I asked as casually as possible, powdering her nose. His tone was light, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't decipher. She's been looking forward to this night for months. The children's hospital means a lot to her. Did it? Or was that another performance in a role she'd perfected? As we reached the bottom of the stairs, I spotted her across the room. For a split second, our eyes met, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, certainly, but tinged with something that might have been calculation. "Senator Hartley is trying to catch your attention," Grayson noted, nodding toward the bar. "Go ahead. I'll find you both for the announcement." I made my way through the crowd, exchanging smiles and nods, my social autopilot engaged while my mind worked furiously. If Lucas was right, if the woman on his plane was indeed Celeste or looked exactly like her, then who was the woman here with us? The question hammered at me as I discussed hospital funding with the senator, as I applauded the auction winners, as I watched Celeste accept congratulations for securing the Cayman vacation package for a record bid. Near midnight, as the gala began, winding down, I found myself alone near the terrace doors. The cool night air provided momentary relief from the stuffiness of the ballroom and my own churning thoughts. "You've seemed distracted tonight, Diana." I turned to find her standing there, Celeste, elegant and composed, a champagne flute dangling from her fingers. Except now, looking at her with new suspicion, I noticed subtle, differences. A certain hardness around her eyes, a slight difference in the way she carried herself. "It's been a long night," I replied carefully. She stepped closer, her perfume enveloping me. Not the Chanel she usually wore, but something sharper, more assertive. "I've always admired you, you know," she said, her voice soft. "The way you built this life after Robert died. Your strength, your adaptability." There was something in her emphasis that raised the hair on my arms. "We all do what we must." I maintained eye contact, refusing to show the unease crawling under my skin. Her smile widened fractionally. "Indeed we do." My phone vibrated in my clutch. Without breaking eye contact, I reached for it. "Excuse me. This might be important." Her gaze flickered to my phone, then back to my face. "Of course, I should find Grayson anyway. It's getting late." As she walked away, I glanced at my screen. "Lucas. Wheels up. We'll call from Geneva. Be careful." And then, a second message. "Found something else. Passport she dropped has irregularities. Checked with a security friend. It's expert-level fake." The chandeliers above me seemed to shudder, casting fractured light across the marble floor. And in that splintered glow, I finally accepted what my instincts had been screaming. The woman who had been living in my son's house, raising my grandson, infiltrating our family, was not who she claimed to be. The morning after the gala, I sat in my sunroom with a cup of tea gone cold, watching dawn break over the manicured garden. Sleep had evaded me, chased away by impossible questions and troubling theories. My phone rang at precisely 7 o'clock. Grayson, predictably prompt even in crisis. "Mother." His voice was tight. "Have you spoken to Lucas?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Briefly, last night." "Why?" "He's been trying to reach me with some ridiculous story about seeing Celeste on his flight. Clearly he's confused. Celeste was with us all evening." The controlled anger in his tone surprised me. "Where is she now?" "Sleeping. The gala exhausted her." A pause. "Mom, I'm concerned about Lucas. These accusations, they're not like him." I chose my words carefully. "Have you noticed anything different about Celeste lately?" The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably before he responded. "What are you implying?" "Nothing specific. Just small inconsistencies." "Like what?" His tone had cooled further. "Using her left hand occasionally. Forgetting conversations we've had. The French phone call I overheard when she's never mentioned speaking French." Another lengthy pause. "She's been under stress with the charity work and Matthew's school issues. And she took French in college. She's mentioned it several times." "Had she?" I couldn't recall, but I was certain of what I'd observed. "Grayson, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. But Lucas was very convinced of what he saw. Lucas has always been imaginative." The dismissal in his voice was reminiscent of his father. "Look, I have to go. We'll discuss this at Sunday dinner." After he hung up, I sat motionless, weighing options. Direct confrontation seemed premature and potentially dangerous if this was some elaborate scheme. But doing nothing was equally unacceptable. I needed more information. In Robert's study, maintained exactly as he'd left it, down to the half-empty Scotch decanter, I unlocked the hidden compartment in his desk. My husband had been meticulously cautious about family security, a trait that had served him well in business and occasionally frustrated me in our personal life. Inside, I found the business card I was looking for. Maxwell Harrington, private investigator. Maxwell had worked for Robert on several delicate business matters. When Robert died, he'd helped me trace some obscured assets. He answered on the second ring, his gruff voice unchanged by the passing years. Diana Montgomery, it's been a while. I need your discretion, Maxwell, and your expertise. You have both. What's the situation? I explained as concisely as possible. The inconsistencies, Lucas's sighting, the passport irregularities. Maxwell didn't interrupt, didn't question my sanity. When I finished, he simply asked, "What do you want to know?" Everything. Celeste's background before she met Grayson, whether she has a twin or a doppelganger, how someone could be in two places simultaneously. I'll need access. Photographs, documents, patterns of movement. You'll have it. But Maxwell, this stays between us for now. My family's safety is my priority. Understood. I'll begin immediately. After ending the call, I moved to my laptop and pulled up family photos. Holiday gatherings, vacation snapshots, formal portraits. I studied Celeste's face across the years, looking for signs I might have missed. In the earliest photos from when she and Grayson first met at a charity regatta, her smile reached her eyes, her posture relaxed and natural. More recent images showed a more polished version. Perfect makeup, calculated poses. Had she changed gradually, or had someone else stepped into her life? My contemplation was interrupted by the doorbell. Through the security monitor, I saw Celeste, or her double, standing on my doorstep, looking perfectly put together in casual designer wear, her smile bright and practiced. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Diana, I hope I'm not interrupting. She leaned in for the customary air kiss. Not at all. Come in. She moved through my foyer with familiar ease, commenting on a new floral arrangement, asking about my housekeeper's recent illness, all the right notes of a caring daughter-in-law. Coffee? Tea? I offered, guiding her to the sitting room. Coffee would be lovely. She settled onto the sofa. I wanted to thank you personally for last night. The gala was spectacular, and the hospital board is thrilled with the fundraising total. I excused myself to the kitchen, using those moments alone to steady my nerves. When I returned with a silver coffee service, she was examining one of the Impressionist paintings. These have always been my favorites in your collection, she said without turning. I set down the tray. Have they? I recall you preferred the landscape in the study. She didn't miss a beat. I love them all, of course, but these capture light so beautifully. As I poured coffee, I noticed her watching me with unusual intensity. Cream, no sugar, correct? I asked, though I knew Celeste took her coffee black. Perfect. She accepted the cup without hesitation. The test was small but telling. We made pleasant conversation about the gala, about Matthew's upcoming school play, about Grayson's business trip to Geneva, scheduled for the following month. Throughout, I searched for signs, clues, anything to confirm or refute my growing suspicions. You know, she said suddenly, setting down her cup, Grayson mentioned you and Lucas had some concerns about me. My heart quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. Did he? What concerns might those be? Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened fractionally. Apparently, Lucas thought he saw me on his flight. Quite impossible, of course. Quite, I agreed mildly, though the resemblance must have been remarkable to confuse my son. Everyone has a doppelganger somewhere, they say. She laughed lightly, though I hope mine has better fashion sense than I did in college. The conversation shifted, but the undercurrent of tension remained. When she left, an hour later, I watched her drive away in her luxury SUV, my mind racing with new questions. She had come to assess what I knew, to gauge whether I was a threat. Of that, I was certain. By evening, Maxwell had made his first report. The background history for Celeste Winters before college is thin. Very thin. I'm finding gaps and inconsistencies that wouldn't be obvious without deep digging. What kind of inconsistencies? School records that don't fully match the institutions she claimed to attend. Addresses that lead to buildings that didn't exist during the time frames listed. And here's the kicker. Her parents' death certificate dates don't align with her statements about when they died. I recalled Celeste's emotional story about losing her parents in a car accident during her sophomore year of college. a narrative that had garnered sympathy and explained her lack of family at the wedding. There's more, Maxwell continued. I'm still confirming, but preliminary facial recognition scans against international databases are showing potential matches in Europe. Different names, similar facial structures. A twin? A sister? Too early to say. But whatever this is, it's sophisticated, professional-level identity crafting. After hanging up, I stood at my bedroom window, watching night settle over the neighborhood where I'd raised my family, where I'd built a life of certainty and security. Now, shadows seemed to lurk in every corner, and at the center of it all was the woman who had infiltrated our lives so completely that questioning her authenticity felt like madness. Yet Lucas had seen what he'd seen, and deep in my heart, I knew something was terribly wrong with the woman who called herself Celeste Montgomery. Lucas's call from Geneva came at 3 a.m, his voice tight with urgency that instantly cleared the fog of my interrupted sleep. Mom, I have confirmation. I've seen her with my own eyes. I sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. Slow down. Tell me exactly what happened. After we landed, I followed them discreetly. They checked into the Hôtel des Bergues, 5-star overlooking Lake Geneva. I heard her introduced as Mrs. Montgomery to the staff, his voice lowered. And Mom, the man she's with, I got a better look. Mid-40s, distinguished, silver at the temples. They're acting intimate. A chill crept up my spine. Did you approach her? No, I kept my distance. But I took photos. My phone pinged with an incoming message. I'm sending them now. The images loaded, crystal clear this time, showing Celeste, or her exact double, entering the luxury hotel, the man's hand resting possessively at the small of her back. Another showed them at dinner in the hotel restaurant, heads bent close in conversation. Wine. Glasses reflecting candlelight. There's more, Lucas continued. I overheard them discussing the Geneva project and Grayson's schedule. She knew details, Mom. Specific dates, contacts, financial projections that aren't public knowledge. My mind raced through possibilities. Corporate espionage? Maybe. Or something worse. He hesitated. I've arranged to stay in Geneva an extra day. There's a meeting tomorrow at Banque Privée Genevoise that they're attending. I'm going to observe, try to learn more. Be careful, I cautioned. If this is what we suspect, I know. His voice hardened. No one messes with our family. After the call ended, sleep was impossible. I reviewed the photos again, studying every detail. The woman was undeniably Celeste in appearance, yet subtle differences emerged under scrutiny. Her posture more assertive, her gestures sharper, her smile calculated rather than warm. By dawn, I'd made a decision. Confronting the Celeste in Dallas was premature, without understanding what we were facing. But sitting idle while potential danger threatened my family was equally unacceptable. I needed to act. I called Maxwell with new instructions, then began preparations for what might prove the most challenging performance of my life. Sunday dinner at my house remained sacrosanct in the Montgomery family calendar. As I prepared the dining room, Robert's antique mahogany table set with the Wedgwood china and sterling silver that had witnessed decades of family milestones, I rehearsed my approach. They arrived at precisely 5 o'clock, Grayson first, his handsome face creased with the distracted frown that had become habitual. Then Matthew, running ahead to hug me with uninhibited affection, and finally Celeste, elegant in casual designer wear, bringing a bouquet of peonies, my favorite flowers. Or rather, Diana Montgomery's favorite flowers, a detail catalogued in her meticulous research. The garden looks magnificent, she commented, gazing through the French doors. Those new hydrangeas are thriving. Thank you. I accepted her kiss on the cheek. Matthew, why don't you show your father the new model airplane grandfather Robert left in the attic? I found it yesterday while sorting through some boxes. As they disappeared upstairs, I turned to Celeste with a carefully composed smile. Wine? I've opened that Bordeaux you admire. Perfect. She followed me to the kitchen, moving with practiced familiarity through my home. I poured 2 glasses, then casually remarked, I spoke with Lucas this morning. He's extending his stay in Geneva. Her fingers tightened imperceptibly around the wine stem. Oh? Mechanical issues again? He mentioned seeing some old friends. I watched her face. He loves that city. So cosmopolitan. Don't you think? I wouldn't know. Her smile remained fixed. I've never been. The lie slid easily from her lips. Yet another confirmation. The real Celeste had accompanied Grayson to Geneva twice in the early years of their marriage. I had the photos and albums upstairs. My mistake. I sipped my wine. I could have sworn you and Grayson visited after your honeymoon. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her features before she recovered. Of course, that trip. It was so brief, I barely count it as visiting. Throughout dinner, I maintained the pretense of normality while cataloging every inconsistency. She misremembered Matthew's kindergarten teacher's name. She ate asparagus, which Celeste had always despised. When Grayson mentioned their anniversary trip to Santorini, she recalled details from photos I'd seen rather than experiences I knew they'd shared. As we finished dessert, creme brulee that she claimed was her favorite, though the real Celeste preferred chocolate, my phone chimed with a text from Maxwell. Package delivered to specified location. Evidence secured. Awaiting your signal. I excused myself briefly, sending a one-word response. Proceed. When I returned, Grayson was discussing his upcoming Geneva trip. The contracts will be finalized next week. We're looking at a 30% increase in European market share. Wonderful news. I squeezed his hand. When do you leave? Wednesday. Just a quick trip. 4 days at most. Celeste's expression remained pleasant, but something calculated flickered behind her eyes. I've been thinking of joining you. Darling, it's been ages since we had time alone. Grayson looked surprised. What about Matthew's science fair? Mother can take him, she replied smoothly. Can't you, Diana? I nodded, though my mind was racing. Lucas had reported the Geneva Celeste discussing plans with her companion that extended well into the following week, overlapping exactly with Grayson's trip. Of course, Matthew and I always have fun together. As they prepared to leave, I embraced my grandson tightly, inhaling his sweet scent of shampoo and childhood. Whatever was happening, whatever storm was brewing, protecting him was my priority. Good night, Diana. Celeste kissed my cheek. Dinner was lovely as always. I held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. Take care of yourself, dear. And remember, family is everything to us Montgomerys. Something cold and assessing flashed in her eyes before her smile returned. I know exactly how important family is. As their car disappeared down the driveway, I reached for my phone. Lucas answered immediately. The pieces are moving, I said without preamble. Grayson's coming to Geneva on Wednesday, and our Celeste is planning to join him. That's impossible. The woman I'm watching has reservations extending through next week with her companion. Exactly. I took a deep breath. Lucas, it's time to bring in Grayson. This has gone beyond suspicion. We have evidence of deliberate deception. Are you sure? He's been dismissive so far. He needs to see the truth with his own eyes. I glanced at the portrait of Robert above the fireplace, drawing strength from his stern, protective gaze. Book me on tomorrow's flight to Geneva. And Lucas, be ready for anything. Whoever these women are, whatever their game, they're professionals. After ending the call, I moved to Robert's study and opened the safe hidden behind his law school diploma. Inside lay a slim folder labeled Celeste Winters, Investigation, dated 3 weeks before her wedding to Grayson. I'd never opened it, respecting Robert's decision to keep his concerns private after Grayson had dismissed them. Now, as I read through the meticulous notes, cold realizations settled in my stomach. Robert had suspected something wasn't right with Celeste's background, discrepancies in her history, gaps in her narrative, inconsistencies that professional investigators couldn't reconcile. But most disturbing was the final note written in my husband's precise handwriting. Facial recognition software indicates possible match with unnamed female subject in Interpol database. Restricted access prevented further investigation. Robert had known, or at least suspected, that the woman our son married wasn't who she claimed to be. And now, years later, the deception had deepened into something far more dangerous than even he had imagined. The flight to Geneva stretched endlessly, each minute ticking by while my mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. I had left Dallas with minimal explanation, a foundation emergency requiring my presence in Switzerland, and instructions for Maxwell to monitor the Celeste in Dallas closely. Lucas met me at Geneva Airport, his handsome face tight with tension. She's still here. Same hotel, same companion. They've been attending meetings at various financial institutions across the city. And Grayson arrives tomorrow. His usual suite is already booked at Le Richemont. Lucas guided me to a waiting car. I've arranged a room for you at a small boutique hotel nearby, discreet but comfortable. As we drove through Geneva's immaculate streets, Lucas shared what he'd learned. The man she's with is Alexander Voss. German national finance background with ties to several international investment groups. Some of those groups have been trying to acquire shares in Grayson's company for the past 2 years. Corporate espionage, then. That's one theory. Lucas hesitated. But there's something else. I managed to get a photo of her. Passport when she checked in? The name is Vivian Winters. The surname struck me like a physical blow. Winters? Celeste's maiden name? Exactly. And facial recognition scans show a 98.7% match. These women aren't just similar, Mom. They're identical. Twins, I whispered. Pieces falling into place. Separated, perhaps. One raised with privilege, one without. It would explain the inconsistencies in Celeste's background that Dad found. We arrived at my hotel, a discreet establishment tucked away on a quiet street. Once settled in my room, Lucas spread photographs across the desk. Surveillance images showing Vivian with Alexander Voss at various locations around Geneva, alongside photos of the Celeste we knew in Dallas. What's the plan? Lucas asked, his expression serious. Do we confront her? I shook my head. Not yet. First, I want to observe, see what she does, who she meets. Then we need to bring Grayson in, carefully. If these women are twins engaging in some kind of elaborate deception, it could destroy him, Lucas finished grimly. And Matthew, I added, my heart aching for my grandson, caught in a web not of his making. We agreed to surveillance. Shifts. Lucas would follow Vivian and Voss during their morning activities while I rested. Then I would take over in the afternoon, allowing me to observe without being immediately recognizable if spotted. Mom, Lucas said as he prepared to leave, be careful. These people, whoever they are, they've maintained this deception for years. That takes resources, connections, and ruthlessness. I squeezed his hand. Your father taught me well, darling. Never underestimate a Montgomery. After he left, I stood at the window overlooking Lake Geneva, its waters darkening with the approach of evening. Somewhere in this elegant city was a woman identical to my daughter-in-law, engaged in a scheme that threatened everything my family had built. Tomorrow, my eldest son would arrive, unaware that his world was about to shatter. I thought of Matthew, his trusting eyes and infectious laugh. Whatever happened in the coming days, protecting him remained my priority. Morning brought Lucas's text. Subjects leaving hotel, heading to Banque Privée Genevoise. Will update. I ordered breakfast to my room and reviewed the dossier Maxwell had compiled on Alexander Voss. His credentials were impeccable. His reputation in financial circles sterling. Yet there were gaps. Periods where he disappeared from public records, only to resurface with new connections and increased wealth. Lucas's updates continued throughout the morning. Meeting at bank concluded. Now at Patek Philippe boutique. Purchased matching watches. $75,000 each. Lunch at Domaine de Chateauvieux. Private room. By early afternoon, I had dressed carefully in a lightweight navy suit, dark sunglasses, and a silk scarf covering my silver-streaked hair. Elegant enough for Geneva's upscale establishments, but different from my usual style. Lucas met me in the hotel lobby. They're back at their hotel. Scheduled dinner at Le Flacon at 8. And Grayson? Landing at 4. Car taking him directly to Le Richemont. I checked my watch. I'll position myself near their hotel. I want to see this woman with my own eyes. Are you sure that's wise? I'll be careful. I squeezed his arm. Text me when Grayson lands. The Hôtel de Bergue stood majestically on the riverbank, its Belle Époque facade exuding old-world luxury. I found a table at a cafe across the square with a clear view of the entrance, and settled. In with a cappuccino and the Financial Times. I didn't have to wait long. At precisely 3:30, they emerged. Vivian Winters and Alexander Voss, the perfect picture of wealthy sophistication. She wore a cream silk dress that I recognized from Celeste's closet, her honey blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. Voss walked beside her, his hand resting possessively at her waist. Even from a distance, the resemblance was uncanny. Her posture, her profile, the tilt of her head as she laughed at something Voss said. Yet there were differences too subtle for anyone but family to notice. A certain hardness to her movements, a calculating quality to her smile, a confidence that bordered on arrogance. They crossed the square and entered a waiting town car. As they passed within 20 feet of my table, I kept the newspaper raised, heart pounding. For a moment, her gaze swept the cafe, and I felt a chill of recognition. Not that she knew me, but that I finally saw her for what she was, a perfect copy, lacking only the soul of the woman she impersonated. My phone vibrated with a text from Lucas. Grayson landed, en route to hotel. Decision time. Should I intercept Grayson before he checked in, tell him everything we'd discovered, or let events unfold, gathering more evidence before confronting the painful truth? The choice was made for me when another text arrived. Vivian and Voss heading to Le Richemont. Now, my blood turned to ice. They were going to Grayson's hotel, deliberately, purposefully, as if knowing his arrival time. Whatever game they were playing had entered a new phase. I paid quickly and hailed a taxi. Le Richemont, s'il vous plaît. Urgence. The driver nodded, pulling into Geneva's elegant traffic. As we crossed the Mont Blanc Bridge, my phone rang. Grayson. Mother? Lucas said you're in Geneva. What's going on? I chose my words carefully. I needed to speak with you in person. Where are you now? Just arrived at the hotel. Checking in. He sounded distracted. Can we meet for dinner? I have calls until 7. Grayson, listen to me. Stay in your room. Don't come down to the lobby or answer your door until I get there. It's important. What? Why? Confusion gave way to concern. Mother, what's happening? I'll explain everything, just promise me. A long pause. Fine, Suite 412, but this better be important. The line went dead as my taxi pulled up to Le Richemont's entrance. I paid quickly and hurried inside, scanning the opulent lobby for any sign of Vivian and Voss. Finding none, I moved swiftly toward the elevators, only to freeze at the sound of a familiar laugh. There, seated in the bar lounge, was Vivian with Voss, champagne flutes in hand, engaged in animated conversation with the hotel manager. She wore a different outfit. Now, a burgundy dress that accentuated her figure, diamonds at her throat and ears. I ducked behind a massive floral arrangement, heart pounding as I texted Lucas. They're here, in the bar. I'm going to Grayson's room. 412. The elevator seemed to crawl between floors. When it finally opened on the 4th floor, I hurried down the corridor, knocking urgently on Suite 412. Grayson opened the door, his expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. Mother, what on earth? Inside, I insisted, pushing past him. We need to talk. He closed the door, loosening his tie. You and Lucas have been acting strangely for days. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Grayson, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen completely before you react. You're scaring me. His face hardened into the businesslike mask he used when facing challenges. The woman you married, Celeste, she has an identical twin. And that twin is here, in this hotel right now. He stared at me, then laughed incredulously. That's ridiculous. Celeste is an only child. Her parents died when she was in college. That's what she told us, but it's not true. I pulled out my phone, showing him the surveillance photos Lucas had taken. This woman calls herself Vivian Winters. She's with a man named Alexander Voss. They've been in Geneva for days, meeting with financial institutions, including partners of your European expansion. Grayson studied the photos, his expression shifting from disbelief to confusion. This is some kind of trick. Photoshop or no trick. I held his gaze. Lucas saw her board his flight in Dallas while Celeste was at the gala with us. He's been tracking her movements in Geneva, and I've seen her myself just now downstairs in the bar. The color drained from his face. This is insane. Celeste would have told me if she had a twin. Unless she was hiding it. Unless both of them were hiding it. I placed my hand on his arm. Grayson, there's more. We believe they've been switching places. For how long, we don't know. But the inconsistencies, the memory lapses, the personality shifts you've mentioned, it makes sense if 2 different women have been living as Celeste Montgomery. He sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. This can't be happening. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. They're leaving the bar, heading to Wine. Elevators. Grayson, listen to me. I kept my voice steady. She's coming up here, now. You need to decide, confront her, or play along until we understand what they're after. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. For a moment, he looked so much like his father, strong jaw set with determination, eyes calculating possibilities. If what you're saying is true, if they've been manipulating me, using my company, my family, a knock at the door silenced him. We exchanged glances, years of family understanding condensed into a single moment of decision. Grayson straightened his shoulders, adjusted his tie, and nodded once. Let's see which Celeste is about to walk through that door. Wait in the bedroom, Grayson whispered, his expression hardening into something I'd rarely seen. The ruthless businessman who had expanded Montgomery Enterprises across 3 continents. I want to handle this myself first. I hesitated, maternal instinct warring with respect for my son's autonomy. Be careful. As I slipped into the adjoining room, leaving the door slightly ajar, Grayson composed himself and moved to answer the knock. Darling. The voice was Celeste's, perfectly pitched, warmly familiar. Yet knowing what I knew, I detected an artifice that had previously escaped notice. Surprise! I couldn't bear to be apart from you this week. Through the crack in the door, I watched Vivian glide into the suite, her movements a flawless imitation of my daughter-in-law's graceful gait. She wore a burgundy dress I'd never seen before, diamonds glittering at her throat, too ostentatious for the real Celeste's understated elegance. Grayson's performance was masterful, the momentary surprise giving way to pleasure, the welcoming embrace that didn't quite reach his eyes. This is unexpected. I thought you were staying with Matthew for his science fair. Your mother insisted she could handle it. Vivian waved dismissively. Besides, I miss our early days, jetting off to exotic locales, making love in luxury hotels. She pressed herself against him, fingers trailing down his chest. I held my breath, watching my son navigate this treacherous charade. What about your companion? Grayson asked casually, disengaging to pour himself a drink. Her composure faltered for only a millisecond. Companion? The gentleman you were having champagne with downstairs. Grayson's tone remained conversational, but I recognized the dangerous calm preceding a storm. Silver hair, German accent, seemed quite familiar with you. Vivian recovered quickly, laughing lightly. Alexander? He's an investment banker I met in the lobby. Potential European investor. I thought I'd do some preliminary networking for you. How thoughtful. Grayson sipped his scotch. And does this potential investor know you're married to the CEO? Or does he think you're Vivian Winters? The silence that followed was absolute. Even from my partial view, I could see the calculation racing behind her eyes, measuring options, escape routes, damage control. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally said, her voice hardening. Who is Vivian Winters? Grayson set down his glass with deliberate care. You tell me, Celeste. Or should I say Vivian? He moved toward the desk, tapping his phone screen. Curious how you were spotted boarding a flight to Geneva while simultaneously attending a charity gala in Dallas. Her facade cracked, something cold and assessing replacing the warm persona she'd maintained. You're confused, darling. Maybe you should rest before dinner. No more games. Grayson's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I want the truth. All of it. Now. The transformation was chilling. The loving wife vanishing like morning mist, replaced by a stranger with Celeste's face but none of her warmth. She straightened, shoulders squaring, chin lifting in defiance. Impressive detective work, she said, her accent subtly shifting, taking on a harder edge. Though I'm disappointed. It took you this long. Where is my wife? Grayson's fist clenched at his side. In Dallas, of course, playing the devoted mother to your precious son. She moved to the minibar, helping herself to champagne with casual insolence. She's quite convincing, isn't she? Almost as good as I am at playing her. I could bear it no longer. I stepped through the doorway, facing the woman who had infiltrated our family. How long has this been going on? Her eyes widened fractionally, the only indication of surprise, before her mouth curved into a cold smile. Diana Montgomery, I should have known you'd be involved. The protective matriarch, always watching, always suspicious. She raised her glass in mocking salute. To answer your question, years. We've been switching places for years. Why? Grayson demanded. What's the purpose of all this deception? Initially, money, of course. She shrugged elegantly. Celeste married for love, how quaint. But I recognized the opportunity. The Montgomery fortune, the business connections, the social access, all too valuable to ignore. And Alexander Voss? I asked. A business partner, among other things. Her smile turned secretive. Your European expansion provided the perfect opportunity to access certain financial channels we've been targeting. Grayson's face had gone pale with fury. My company, my family, my son, all just pieces in your game? Something flickered across her face, perhaps the first genuine emotion she'd displayed. Matthew was never part of the game. Celeste would never have agreed if he were at risk. The implication stunned us both. Celeste is complicit in this? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. Vivian laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. Of course she is. We're twins, Diana. Two halves of a whole. Did you think I forced her? She took another sip of champagne. I found her after our parents died. Or rather, after her adoptive parents died. We were separated at birth, you see. She got the loving family, the private schools, the easy path. I got foster homes and struggle. So this is revenge? Grayson's voice was hollow. Call it rebalancing the scales. Her eyes hardened. When I found her in college, she was horrified, then fascinated. The sister she never knew existed. The life she could have had. We started small, trading places for a day, then a weekend. She got to escape her perfect, predictable life. I got to experience how the other half lived. And when she met me, Grayson asked, that wasn't planned. She genuinely fell in love with you. Vivian's expression softened marginally. But your background check complicated things. Your father was thorough, almost discovered our arrangement. So we became more careful, more strategic. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The corporate espionage, the financial access, that was you, I said. But Celeste's life in Dallas, the charity work, Matthew's upbringing, mostly her, Vivian confirmed. Though I enjoy the galas, such excellent networking opportunities. Grayson moved with sudden purpose, pulling out his phone. I'm calling security. Vivian's laughter stopped him. And tell them, what? That your wife has an identical twin who sometimes takes her place? That you can't tell the difference between the woman you married and her sister? She set down her glass. Besides, I've committed no crime. Every document I've used has been legal. Celeste saw to that. Legal but fraudulent, I countered. Semantics. She glanced at her watch. Now I have a dinner reservation with Alexander. Considering the circumstances, I think it's best I keep it. Grayson blocked her path. You're not going anywhere until I speak with Celeste. Fine. Vivian pulled out her phone, dialing with manicured fingers. Sister dear, your husband is being difficult. Yes, they know everything. Of course I'm calm. One of us needs to be. He wants to speak with you. She handed the phone to Grayson, whose hand trembled slightly as he took it. Celeste? His voice cracked on the name. Is it true? All of it? He listened, face contorting with pain and disbelief. How could you? Matthew? Our life? Was any of it real? I couldn't hear her responses, but I watched my son's face crumble, years of trust dissolving in minutes. When he finally lowered the phone, he looked aged by decades. She confirms everything, he said hollowly. They've been switching places since before we married. The Geneva operation was Vivian's project, but Celeste knew. He turned to Vivian with cold fury. Get out. Now. When I return to Dallas, we'll discuss the legal ramifications, including custody of my son. Vivian gathered her purse with unruffled composure. This isn't over, Grayson. Your life is more entwined with ours than you realize. At the door, she paused. And Diana? You were right to be suspicious. I never could quite master her handwriting. As the door closed behind her, Grayson collapsed into a chair, the weight of betrayal crushing his shoulders. I moved to his side, placing a hand on his back, the same comforting gesture I'd used since he was a small boy with scraped knees. What have I done, Mother? He whispered. What happens to Matthew now? 6 months after the Geneva revelation, the chandeliers in my dining room cast their familiar glow over a different family gathering. Matthew sat beside me, enthusiastically describing his science project, something involving solar energy that had won first prize at his school. Grandmother, Dad says I can build a bigger version in the backyard if you help me with the calculations, he said, blue eyes bright with excitement. I'd be honored, I replied, squeezing his shoulder gently. Across the table, Grayson smiled, a genuine expression that had become increasingly common as the raw wound of betrayal gradually scarred over. Lucas sat beside him, home between flights, the brothers united by crisis in a way years of normalcy had never achieved. The legal aftermath of the twins' deception had been managed with the quiet efficiency the Montgomery family prized. No public scandal, no media circus, just precisely targeted legal actions and financial adjustments. Grayson had divorced Celeste on grounds of fraud, securing primary custody of Matthew, with limited supervised visitation for his mother. Celeste herself had disappeared from Dallas social circles, reportedly living in a modest apartment in Seattle, working for a nonprofit. According to Lucas, who occasionally checked on her from a distance, she seemed subdued but stable, accepting the consequences of her decisions with quiet dignity. Vivian and Alexander Voss had vanished more thoroughly, though intelligence suggested they'd relocated to Eastern Europe. The financial schemes they'd attempted had been thwarted. Montgomery Enterprises' European expansion proceeding under enhanced security protocols. "More potatoes, anyone?" I offered, maintaining the pleasant rhythm of family dinner. Later, as Matthew played in the garden and Lucas helped with dishes, Grayson joined me in the sunroom, scotch in hand. His father's preferred evening, not ritual. "I received a letter from Celeste today," he said quietly, gazing out at the twilight garden where his son constructed an elaborate fort from lawn furniture. "What did she want?" I kept my voice neutral, though concern immediately flared. "Nothing dramatic. She's accepted a position with an international aid organization, leaving the country for at least 2 years." He sipped his scotch. "She's requested video calls with Matthew instead of in-person visits. Given the circumstances, I agreed." I nodded, understanding the complexity of emotions behind his measured tone. "And how do you feel about that?" Grayson's laugh held little humor. "How do I feel about the woman I loved or thought I loved, abandoning our son after using our marriage as cover for her twin schemes?" He shook his head. "I don't know, Mother. Some days I hate her. Some days I miss the person I thought she was. Perhaps she was that person. Sometimes." I chose my words carefully. "People are complex, Grayson. Even those who deceive. That's what haunts me." He turned to face me, vulnerability evident in eyes so like his father's. "In all those years, all those moments when they switched places, I never knew. What kind of husband doesn't recognize when his wife is someone else? A husband who trusted completely." I reached for his hand. "There's no shame in that." We sat in companionable silence, watching Matthew in the garden, the innocent center of our reconfigured family. "The investigators found something interesting in their final report," Grayson said eventually. "About the twins' background." "Oh?" "Their birth mother was apparently some kind of con artist, specialized in assuming false identities, manipulating wealthy targets. Served time in federal prison." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Makes you wonder about nature versus nurture. Celeste was raised by decent people yet still participated in the deception. Vivian had a harder path, became the architect. Yet Celeste is the one who chose to step away, to face consequences," I pointed out. "That speaks to character formed beyond genetics." "I suppose." He sighed heavily. "I worry about Matthew. What he's inherited, what he's learned from all this." "Look at him, Grayson." I nodded toward the garden, where Matthew was carefully placing stones around his fort's perimeter. "He's methodical like you, creative like his grandfather, and kind despite everything he's experienced. Focus on nurturing those qualities." As if sensing our attention, Matthew looked up and waved, his smile uncomplicated and genuine. The doorbell rang, interrupting our contemplation. Lucas appeared in the doorway. "It's Maxwell. Says he has some final documents for you to sign." Grayson nodded, squeezing my hand before rising. "The last of the financial separations. After this, the Montgomery assets should be completely disentangled from anything the twins could access." After he left, Lucas took his place on the sofa. "He's healing," he observed quietly. "Slowly." I smiled at my youngest son. "Thanks in large part to you. If you hadn't noticed her on that flight—" "I almost didn't," Lucas admitted. "She was so convincing. The walk, the mannerisms. If she hadn't dropped that passport, some things are meant to be discovered." I gazed at the portrait of Robert above the fireplace. "Your father suspected something wasn't right years ago. Perhaps he guided your eyes to that passport." Lucas followed my gaze, smiling slightly. "Dad always did have a way of protecting the family, even when we didn't know. We needed protection." As evening deepened into night, Matthew was tucked into his bedroom at my house, now a familiar weekend routine, and the brothers retired to the study, their voices a comforting murmur of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. I stood alone in the dining room, looking up at the chandeliers that had witnessed so much of our family's history. Their crystal teardrops no longer seemed to tremble with foreboding, but rather to sparkle with quiet resilience. The truth had indeed shattered our illusions. About Celeste, about the security we thought we'd built, about the reliability of appearances. Yet in that shattering, we had discovered the unbreakable core of what made us family. Not blind trust, but the willingness to protect each other when trust was broken. Not flawless judgment, but the courage to face painful revelations. Not immunity from deception, but the strength to rebuild from its ruins. I turned off the dining room lights, leaving the chandeliers in darkness. Tomorrow they would catch the morning sun, transforming shadowy crystal into prisms of colored light, just as we had transformed our family's darkest moment into a foundation for moving forward. As I climbed the stairs toward my bedroom, I heard Matthew's sleepy voice from his room. "Grandmother? Is everything okay?" I paused in his doorway, smiling at the drowsy figure illuminated by his rocket ship nightlight. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. The Montgomery family is stronger than ever." He nodded, already drifting back to sleep. "Dad says we're made of steel underneath." "Your father is a wise man," I whispered, closing his door gently. In the quiet hallway, surrounded by portraits of generations past, I felt Robert's presence more strongly than I had in years, not as a ghost, but as a continuation of values that couldn't be broken by deception or betrayal. The chandeliers might tremble, shadows might lurk, and strangers might walk in familiar skins. But in the end, truth and family would prevail, shining with a clarity that no duplicity could permanently dim.